everyone, and welcome to another very encouraging roundtable episode. Normally, these are kind of structured for us to uh, debate our views, but I feel like on this topic, we're going to kind of be somewhat in harmony with maybe just different perspectives. So, what we'll be talking about is not necessarily giving up on a story, but pretty much if you have a story that you're writing or did write in the past, if you gave up on it, it doesn't mean defeat. It just means that you've moved on to your next project. So, to begin the stream, I'd like to introduce you to my amazing co-host. So, as we dive into the discussion, just remember that everything is uh, our opinions, so take them with a grain of salt. And to begin, uh, Artsumi Shae, would you please introduce yourself to us?
Yes, hi. Yes, I am Artume Shae. At Space Ultima is my other IG username for my comic itself. But yes, I am a Webtoon webcomic creator. I kind of stream my Webtoon creating process on Twitch. And I also do YouTube where I document some of my process and my tips on creating comics and art, and also some of my other fun adventures like convention vlogs and things like that. And my webcomic in Webtoon is called Space Ultima. It is a sci-fi adventure with superpowered people, as well as some fun romance, because who doesn't like that? And yeah, it's actually come August 23rd is going to be the 1 year anniversary of Space Ultima, which is super exciting. Gonna try to do something fun for that. But yeah, just obviously, like a bunch of us, not my first time on this horse, and I hope that it won't be your last time on the webcomic creation journey either.
Yes, thank you so much, Shay. Please check out all of her content. If you're interested, you can take a screenshot of any of the ads for any of the creators that are coming up. And let's move to our next co host, Audrey, aka Toasted Bun Comics. Would you please introduce yourself?
Hey guys, so I'm Audrey. You can also call me Fun and Toast. I've been called all of them. I have a web comic on Webtoon and Papa's, and Ink is called I'll Keep Your Secret. I've been doing web comics for like 3 years now. Um, and my first web comic I started in 2021, and then it went until 2022, and then I kind of just stopped stopped making it. And then I got the idea for this comic last year. I think I spent like 5-6 months kind of like formulating the story and character design and all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, you can check out my comic on Webtoon. It is a romance. I did have it slice of life, but after I've drafted through the plot again, I just changed it to drama, so it's romance drama. Yeah, and if you like manual art style, if you like handsome male leads and adorable couples, then you'll like my comic.
Thank you so much. Yes, please check out I'll Keep Your Secret. It is amazing. I love the characters. I was about to call you Toasty, Audrey.
You can call me Toasty, that's fine.
Oh, perfect. Okay, Clarice, please introduce yourself. Thank you, Toasty.
Alright, well, I'm Claricee. I've been working on webcomics since 2020. My first project was Inevitable Destiny, which I released at the very beginning of 2020, January 1st. And I worked on that until about mid 2023, until I stopped working on that story. And I'm currently working on a new story called The Silent and Deathly, which is releasing soon on a bunch of platforms like Webtoon, Canvas, Global Comics, and such. And it's a set in the Victorian era. It's a murder mystery, with a little bit of romance and drama, of course. And I did have an official release date, but I'm just really taking my time with it to really work on it and to be the best it can be, and I can't wait to release it.
We're so excited to see your, I was going to say secret project, but I guess it's not a secret. Your upcoming
Not
project.
anymore.
And so, with that, why don't we just dive in? You know, what's really interesting, I think, for almost every creator is we kind of have these different perspectives on our first story. Like, some of us, it is our precious child that we keep coming back to. Some of us, it's the story that kind of got us into writing or into creating stories. And so, I think it's kind of a safe space to kind of start with. What did you learn from working on your first story?
So I'll start. I think what learning I got from my first story was probably being prepared as much as possible. Now, don't get me wrong, like, even with my current story, I realize that things do change, but I noticed that when I wasn't as prepared in certain, like, brainstorming, elements of the story writing, my characters themselves, when I just did not have as much legwork beforehand, it was becoming harder and harder to like come back to it. So I noticed that not knowing what my ending was going to be like, not knowing what certain like pivotal story arc elements were going to happen, those things kind of made it almost impossible to sustain my original comic. And also, I just realized it's more fun. You know, I love world building, I love character development. Those are things that I talk about all the time on my platform. So I felt like feeling more prepared. That way, when things do evolve and change, you have a place to start from. Those are some of the things that I learned beforehand that I definitely think have made future writings and creations a lot easier.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that just as creators in general, sometimes we go into stories with like clear mindsets, or we go into stories not necessarily knowing like where the story is going to lead. And so I like that you mentioned that even as you're working on your current project, you're still learning from that project, growing as a writer and creator. What about you two, Claricee, Toasty?
So I can relate on not having a set ending as well. For Inevitable Destiny, I actually had 7 endings that I was trying to decide on which one would actually be the ending. And I thought I had it, but no. And when I first started Inevitable Destiny, I didn't really give myself time in the beginning to really um, write out my story. Like Shae was saying, like all the major plot points, the ending, just really the flow of the story. I didn't give myself that time initially in the beginning because I was just so excited to, release a webtoon or a comic, and I didn't give myself the time that I needed in the beginning. And so with my new story, I am definitely taking much more time. I mean, I just had to push back the release date, probably, maybe. And that's okay. In the past, I would have beaten myself up about that, but it's really, you gotta prioritize your health. First of all, that's what I really learned while making my first story, because at the end, I burnt out incredibly bad, and because I just kept pushing myself. And so I just really learned to just take my time with my creative process and just know that it isn't the same as everyone else's, and to just really have fun with it.
Yeah, I can empathize with that a lot. Burnout is so hard to kind of avoid, but also like deal with if you're in it. Um, I mean, I kind of had a similar experience with my first comic. Like, I didn't get burned out on it because I didn't really update it that often, but I did struggle with the ending. I couldn't figure out like exactly how I wanted to end it, and because of that, I had a really difficult time with pacing, with knowing where the story was going. Like I had the beginning and like parts in my head, but my first webcomic experience, I didn't do any like mapping of the plot. I didn't do any storyboarding. I didn't do any scripting. Like I just kind of winged it, and I think that I think that contributed to me not being able to like keep going with it, just because I think I kind of lost the plot after a little while, and like I didn't even actually like really get into the plot, um, just because I didn't know how to properly like structure the story in a way that I could start getting into like the really important stuff.
Oh, wow. Like, those are all really excellent points. I think for me, what my first story taught me, and I think this is more on a fundamental level than on like a technical or like a skill level, is it kind of exposed myself as being like a bit of a perfectionist. And I think having that first story really indicated to me like I had no clue on understanding like the scope of a project. Like in my head, I've simplified it a lot, but then when I started like actually writing out scenes or writing out the like timeline or the linear structure of the plot, it was just kind of like, oh, this went from 30 episodes to 300. Like, what am I doing here? This was supposed to be an easy story. So I think like my very first attempt at a webtoon, the scope was insane. Like, and I think it's just because of the type of media that I consumed. Like consuming it makes it seem like it's so easy. Like you're like, oh yeah, that plot is really straightforward. That's really easy. That's really simple. But like getting to that destination is still a lot of hard work and a lot of like planning involved. And I think that's really helped me a lot when taking on any project. I really consider like, what is the scope of this? Is this realistic for me to do? Is this something that I'm going to tie myself to for the next 10 years? Like, what am I going to do? Because I don't think there's necessarily a wrong thing with picking a big scope, but it's also one of those things where it's like, am I trying to make another One Piece? Like, what's going on here?
That's
We'd be
basically
here all day.
Yeah, that's kind of the same thing happened to me. I mean, Inevitable Destiny is a fantasy action adventure story, and I was like, in the beginning, I was like, this is going to be like 200 episodes, and I thought that was easy. No, no, it's not. And like, as I was writing, the plot kept changing because I didn't have anything like the big plot points planned out before I started working on it. So then the plot kept changing. I kept wanting to add things, but I couldn't because then it didn't make sense with the current plot. And I was like, oh. And then I ultimately like I was like, this is what is happening. What are we doing?
Yeah,
There's so
yeah.
much happening.
I think another point too, and kind of like with Paulo, you mentioning that we consume this media, and by consuming it, then we think immediately that we can do it, which we can. But it's so interesting. Like when I first started my first webtoon, I was only reading webtoons. I wasn't like researching them. I wasn't looking up videos on YouTube. Granted, maybe they just weren't as common as they are now, but I think that's another thing that I've learned is that if I don't know how to do something, I need to, reach out to other people who do,
Mm-hmm.
who are in like the direction that I'm wanting to go into. And then from there, learning from them to help aid and fuel my thing. Because, yeah, like between now and then, I communicate way more with other fellow webtoon creators. I have looked at and consumed much more material to like prepare me. So that's the thing. It's like do your research not only in terms of, the story that you're trying to make, but do your research by other people who are doing it too.
Oh yeah, that's such good points because I do think I really do feel like a few years ago there wasn't as much like
Mm-mm.
media to consume. I don't know if media is the right word, but content to consume on like the creator side. So like there was some who were out there like I feel like Kaez and oh, what is his name? Walter Osley. They've been around for a while. And so like you had them as resources, but it was also kind of like I don't know if anybody was explaining to me like how hard making an episode is. And I can even think about like the one episode short story that I made. It took me like 2 months to make that. And it's probably like 20 panels. And I simplified. I made the like script really simple. And it still took me a lot of work to figure out because another thing I learned when making any comics in general is like I see like specific scenes in my head, but I don't see the in between. So like I could see like let's say it's like a romance. I'm like, ooh, and they kissed. And so like I have a clear visual of that and like all the other words in the script I have no visuals for. So like sometimes it'll take me like a day or two to come up with like the imagery for it. And I think some of that is like learned. Like the more you work in the field, the more you work as a webtoon creator, the more you're able to easily come up with those images. But I just feel like, it's all a work in progress. Like, even if your first story isn't necessarily going to be the one you continue with, you can take all the knowledge from it. And if you want, you can revamp it in the future. Or you can, you know, retire it to to the void in your house where no one will see it. So it does kind of make me wonder. We kind of touched on it, but I'd love to hear how your first story helped you improve in areas like art, your storytelling, and even marketing.
Yeah, I'll go first. So I'll just start with art. Um, I I keep my webtoon up. I keep all the old art in my Instagram like there because I like going back and seeing how much I've improved since then. Um, for me, my experience, I I'm a graphic designer. I've been doing design for like 10 plus years. But drawing was never like a requirement for the job. And so I kind of just took my art classes in high school and then like some in college just to like get my degree. But I never kind of pursued it as like a hobby. Um, and so back in 2018, I found webcomics and I was like, these are so fun. I love this. It's like, why have I never like heard of this before? And then by the time 2020 rolled around, I was kind of like feeling like, oh, I really want to start my own webcomic, but I was too anxious to because I didn't know where to start. And my husband was like, well, why don't you just start it? And I was like, because I don't know how to. um, so I kind of just started drawing it. Like I had been consuming webcomics for a few years up until that point, and so I kind of had an idea of where I wanted to go. But at the time, I had a Wacom tablet, not like a drawing display tablet or like an iPad. It was just the drawing tablet, and then I'd look at my screen while I was drawing, and I didn't even I didn't even look up references. I didn't even start studying like basic art like drapery and lighting and shadow. Like I just kind of like just did it. And like I feel like I was just so eager to start. I just wanted to get into it. So um yeah, I just kind of improvised, I'll say, like everything. And as time went on, I started to just kind of pick things up. Like I would started watching videos. I started kind of like seeing what my favorite webcomic artists were doing in terms of like composition and style. And like I really like looked to my favorite artists and I was like, okay, what are they doing? What does their line art quality look like? How are they doing the rendering? How are they composing panels? Like, that kind of stuff. So I didn't necessarily like want to emulate a certain style, but I did kind of take what they did and put my own twist on it. So I developed a very clean line art style. I developed kind of not like overly vibrant colors, but like very light rendering kind of stuff. But part of the reason why I kind of stopped with my first comic was I started making it too complicated. I started adding so many details that I didn't need to add. And I think that kind of contributed to some like I was still confused in what I wanted the art style to look like, but I just kind of wanted to include all this detail because I was like, I want it to look really good. So I kind of, when I dropped my first comic, I took a break and then I entered the Webtoons Call to Action contest where you had to do like an action scene. And that was my first time doing an action scene, and it was really fun. Like that actually really helped me learn too in terms of like how to create dynamic poses. And then I took another break after that. I was just doing fan art. And then when I started, like, okay, I don't want to work on this old comic before big because I feel like I kind of lost the plot with it. But I was like, okay, I'm going to start a new one. So maybe I could take this time and like solidify what my art style should be. And I where did I post on Instagram? I think I posted my two OCs first character designs on my Instagram a while back, and it's so different from what it is now. Like I was looking at a lot of very simplistic manhwa art styles back then, and I think they influenced it, but I'm really glad I kind of took it in a direction where it's, I'm like, what's the word? Shiny? I don't know. But yeah,
Polished, maybe?
Yeah, polished. Yeah, I'd say that, polished. Yeah, and so I mean, my art style is still developing. I'm improving, but yeah. So that was, I don't know about you guys, but that was kind of my experience with developing art, like my art style.
That's great. Yeah. No, it's definitely a similar journey because you're just like, I guess I'll just go ahead and do this thing, and I'm super excited about it. And
Yeah.
I like having kind of like the openness and freedom to see what happens, but
Mm-hmm.
then there's the part that's like, okay, I need some structure.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I think that for me the improvement in the areas similar to what I said earlier was storytelling. So my first web comic, it was this web comic called Underdog, and it was kind of like a like supernatural story about this guy who is a werewolf, but he's has no control over his transformation. And there was also obviously there's a romance and other aspects in there. And while I enjoyed, the supernatural like kind of like werewolf wolfman horror genre, it wasn't like I guess my calling to like, oh, this is definitely the type of content that I want to make. Like, I wish at the time I realized it, but in hindsight, I've always been into sci-fi, like, Cowboy Bebop, Mass Effect, like all these different sci-fi things, these futuristic cyber things have always been my interest. So I think that even for me with my new story, I kind of had to like assess myself and be like, okay, what is the genre that I really connect to, that I feel like at home in, and then telling my story within that. Because I like how genres, you have certain characteristics of the genre, but then you can tell whatever kind of story you feel like in there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that was for me the realization that, and I'm this is my from my observation, but when you go on to like seeing the top highlighted spotlight stories on Webtoon, it's not common that you find sci-fi on there. it's not uncommon, but the
Mm-hmm.
number of sci-fi is very limited in that platform. So I think kind of overcoming that fear initially was part of it, because yes, you want to get eyes on your stuff, but you also kind of want to make something that really resonates with you and, hope that people enjoy it. So I think just really kind of sticking to sticking to like what I really connect with, was part of the storytelling process that I think I had to kind of overcome and improve. And then,
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, just in terms of marketing, just knowing that, none of these platforms are really responsible for advertising my comics. So I've definitely been utilizing, Instagram, their Instagram business tools, and all that good stuff to just make sure right now I'm kind of on a TikTok Reels kick. So, like,
Yeah.
I've been
Yeah.
really trying to, like, if I'm drawing something, if I have an episode coming out, I'm like, I need to make, even if it's like a 5-second video, I need to make something about it so that way people can see it, and hopefully the algorithm shines upon me one day.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
I love
that's
that.
definitely, yeah. It's definitely hard to try and market your comic, um, like on social media, because it's honestly, it is very hard to just grow or get any subscribers on Webtoon, because there are so many comics on there, and depending on which genre you pick, like even the sci-fi genre has like almost 13,000 titles in it. Like it's
Yeah.
very hard to
Mm-hmm.
get noticed. And so one thing that I learned that is really important is, one, like if you're trying to get subscribers just on Webtoon, one important thing to know is like and to post your episodes on Webtoon, and that could be like either a day or a time of day. For me, I started posting them like my first webcomic. I didn't actually have a schedule. I just kind of posted it whenever it was done. Um, but with this new comic, I post it in the evenings between like 7 and 8 p.m. my time. Just because a lot of users are active on Webtoon at night. Like it's a night and they've got like dinner on the way if they're in school, like maybe their homework is done or whatever it is. They're kind of settling down for the evening, so they're probably scrolling on their phones.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the other thing I will point out, I didn't really think too much about my thumbnails, like episode thumbnails and the webcomic like main thumbnail, but those are your first impressions with a reader, and you can actually get maybe some more readers clicking on your comic if your story thumbnail looks really interesting and your episode thumbnails look really interesting. So it could be like close-ups of the character's like expression. It could be just like something really dramatic with the lighting. Um, and then with like your story thumbnail, like your main, like your cover, essentially, that's like the very first thing a reader is going to look at. Um, and a lot of the time, I see like this is just like it comes with knowledge and like learning about webcomics in general and stuff. But I see artists that will kind of put the title of their webcomic in the thumbnail, or they'll even have like
Yeah.
an
Mm-hmm.
image of maybe their main character or two main characters, but it's really small and you can't really see the details and like what they look like. I also see people just posting like um, it like a panel from an episode as their series thumbnail, and again, it's just learning. Um, it comes with time. With beginner artists or beginner like webcomic creators, I will say big thing is try to spend more time thinking about your thumbnails, just because again, it's like first impressions, and that just kind of goes with like getting noticed on Webtoon, but like social media and like TikTok and Instagram, whatever, is like a different story, right? But that is one tip I will give beginner creators.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I. Oh, you go ahead.
no, I was just going to say about Shae's comment, I think that's really interesting that you tried out a genre and like immediately you kind of knew it wasn't the right fit. And I say immediately relatively because I don't know how long you worked on the other story. But sometimes I think certain people feel like I've started this, I've committed to it, therefore I must produce it. But sometimes you can get a feeling where you're like, this just isn't working. And so I like that you were able to tell, like, this genre isn't for me. Let me see if I can find something else.
Oh, for sure. And it comes from a trial and error. You know, I remember when I was younger, I was drawing comics, writing stories all the time, and I would like do these really deep world buildings for a graphic novel. It was going to be like 500 pages. None of those panned out. They definitely didn't.
Talk about
And
that
I think,
scope.
yeah, and I just feel like there's something about, I don't know, I definitely relate to it when people want to jump into really big, lofty projects. I was talking to somebody and I was like, if I were to tell my younger self anything, it would be to work on short comics. Like work on, 5-page itty bitty stories. And I
Mm-hmm.
think there's kind of maybe like an unspoken stigma behind short stories where it's just like, oh, I don't want to invest too much time because it's short and it'll be over like nothing. But no, there's definitely some value in that because if you write these short stories and it just inevitably turns into something you want to expand upon, that's even better. I've seen comics that start out as, little 1 to 2 episode things, and people love it so much, and then they just carry on and make it a full series. So there's definitely good practice in starting small.
Mm-hmm.
That way you're not feeling like you have to throw out something you've invested so much time into.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. What about you, Clarice? What have you found and improved in?
So, I worked on Inevitable Destiny for 3 years, and the first thing that I majorly improved on just by working on it was my art. Like, you look at the first episode of Inevitable Destiny, and then, like, the last episode, which is episode 40 something, and it's like it's two different artists. Like my anatomy improved, like just everything in general improved just by working on the comic. And I did studies and everything else outside the comic, but just the nature of just, okay, I got to draw this character from this specific angle and just trying to figure that out in like every episode, because I feel like every comic episode, like you have that 1 or 2 panels that it's like, man, this is just really difficult. I don't, should I change it or should I just try to figure it out? So, and I had a lot of those. But that really helped like build my confidence as an artist, and just to see that improvement, um, like other people pointed it out, but I think for an artist to see their improvement is just like a huge confidence builder, because it's not like, oh, is my, because a big fear with publishing to just anybody is like, are people gonna like this? Are people gonna resonate with the
Mm-hmm.
story? Are
Mm-hmm.
people gonna like my art? And so like knowing like you're just constantly improving in making, if like for that long. And I mean, I think I went through like 3 different styles through Inevitable
Oh, wow.
Destiny. The first 2 episodes, I don't even know what I was doing, and that's what I call the style. Like the first like 3-ish episodes, I didn't have a set art style. I kept changing the line brush until I found one that I liked, and then for the majority of the story, I had like cell shading, and then at the end of the first season and the little bit of the second season that I did, I got I think like many of us had, I think Audrey mentioned it. I did so much with the lighting and shading and details that I didn't have to do. Like
Yeah.
you look at the last episode of Inevitable Destiny and it's like, what like all the painterly strokes and everything. I was like, every panel has to be perfect, and I'm like, this is way too much. Way
Oh my
too much.
god.
Too much work. And I eventually got burnt out, of course. So with my next story, I'm definitely kind of keeping like I different line art brush, different story. That's how I work apparently. But I really simplified my shading style and lighting style for my next story because for the Silent and Deathly because I don't want to take forever on it like I did at the end of Inevitable Destiny because oh man, I took so many days with the lighting and shading. I mean, it looked beautiful, but at what cost?
Your sanity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And like along with I mentioned before, like with not having like a set plot or anything or a set ending, I really didn't know. Like I kind of knew where the plot was going, but then I kept wanting to add things or change things. But then I was like, but I already said this in a past episode. I can't change that. So, um, like going into my new story, The Silent and Deathly, I'm really just taking my time planning out everything as much as I can, especially like the main plot points. And like, okay, when is this gonna happen? What is the character feeling? What are we doing, basically?
Yeah.
And like, I think she mentioned like things in a story can change just by the nature of working on it. That happened to me so many times in Inevitable Destiny. It's like the characters are writing the story. I don't know where they're going. What are they doing? Um, so um, so that's definitely helping me. I know some creators that they just have the main plot points and then they just go and make their story. I thought I could do that, but I learned that I'm not that kind of person creatively, and that's okay. I think we all just have different processes in how we write, and all that behind the scenes work. We all kind of work a bit differently, and we all kind of need something different for ourselves in that process. So for me, it's planning out as much as possible before starting, which I did not do with my previous story. That was very evident. That was also with marketing because I think I marketed my story a little bit like before the release date, but I was just so excited to get it out. I was like, all right, I'm releasing a comic next week. Hope you come. Hope you come and read it. But then as I released it, I looked at other creators' pages to see what they were doing to promote their comic, especially on Instagram and Twitter. And I really, at the end, had a formula that really worked. I had like a clip studio document that I would just, like replace the fill of the episode of, and then like change the name and whatever episode it was, and then I would just save it and post it wherever. But at the beginning, I really didn't know what I was doing with marketing. But marketing is, especially on like Instagram and Twitter and whatever socials now, is really not easy. Like mentioned, like it's promoting your own work. It's not like fan art or anything. Like you have, I think for my next story, I definitely have more of a marketing plan for beforehand. Like, do you like Sherlock Holmes and things like that? I think that's a great way to pull in an audience. Is like if you like this and this, then you'll like this, and I think that's a great marketing tactic, which I'm definitely going to do instead of just what I was randomly doing at the beginning to promote my story, which was, hey, here's my comic. Am I gonna tell you anything about it? No. But here's the episode link.
That was kind of how I did it too. Like when I started my first one, I kind of just posted. I was like, "Look at this panel I'm working on," or "Here are the episodes out." I didn't really like. I wasn't creating content that was engaging for anyone to like want to check out my comic. And this time around, so I started posting about my new comic. Let's see. I think I really started posting it in like October of last year, and that was like some images of like the old character design. And and some other stuff. But I I I think what I started doing was posting. See, this is kind of funny. So sorry, I'll get into my main point. I will mention this though. Hattie Inc. They're also a company that hosts webcomics. They have their webcomic reader app called Inkverse. They made an article and like a Reddit post about like how to market your comic, and they included my Instagram page on there only for the fact that most of my content that I put out is about Daehyun, my male lead. Like everybody loves him, and so like, okay, well if that's what people like seeing, I guess I'll just keep posting about him. He's
Yeah.
very like, he's kind of like the culmination of all the male leads that I love. And so I just kind of found that my readers and like other people like content with Daehyun in it. And so since I kind of found my own little groove of marketing, I ended up like it benefited me when I released my comic. I already had very like dedicated and excited readers to check it out because I just had marketed it way more than my first one. And I got like I think March 10th I published it, the first 3 episodes. Oh, I will also sorry, I know I'm kind of jumping around, but for beginner webcomic artists, if you are not sure if you should just post the prologue or the first episode, spend time to create your first 3 episodes. Don't post anything that's like, don't make an episode that's just the cover art because readers will get turned off by that. They're like, I want to start reading because it looks interesting, and if all I have is cover, they'll just get disappointed. So spend time, read your first 3 episodes, and within those first 3 episodes, have the hook to your story. This kind of goes into storytelling as well. Webtoon had a creator summit in 2021. They have really great videos on YouTube where the editors talk about how to structure your first 3 episodes. That's a really good one to go check out. I would definitely recommend it. But anyway, so I posted the first 3 episodes March 10th, and then by the end of the day, I basically had like 100 subscribers already just because I had marketed it, and I spent a lot of extra time like trying to create engaging content. And it's like, how long has it been? Like 5 months later, and I have like almost 1,700 subs. So I think, spend time trying to create content that is engaging for people to want to interact with, that gets them interested in your comic. Like, it could be a 5 to 7 second reel about kind of showcasing the art for it and using like a trending song. You could also make like, in my experience, the reels that do really, really well are ones where you're asking your audience or whoever is watching it to interact with you. So you could just have a reel of like art from your comic and then say, artist, what is your favorite, who's your favorite character to draw? Or like if you're trying to engage with readers, like maybe say like, what's your favorite webtoon or something that like gets readers or whoever to like want to interact with whatever content it is. But it's just, marketing is just, it's so hard. It is really difficult, especially when you like don't know where to start, but in my experience, reels are they do better than posts. I will say they'll get more reach than your posts. Your posts are mainly for your current followers that are following you, and reels are for if you want to get to reach out to people that aren't following you. But yeah, I think I'll make a reel about marketing your comic at some point. I think that would be good.
Yeah, that would be awesome. We love to see it. Please go ahead and make it for us. I will say the one thing I think about like this topic or this question that we're focusing on right now is basically from working on your comic or working on your story, like gradually you just learn that there's areas where you're going to improve. So art, if you're making a comic, you're going to improve in it regardless of what skill level you're at. Storytelling, same thing, and marketing, same thing. And like all of these things are like very fluid because like you could be an amazing artist already or an amazing storyteller, but it's just the more you work in your craft, I feel like the more you learn. So like if you do have to stop your first story because if it's like me and the scale is too big, then you have to take a break from it and tell something smaller or do like a practice story like Shae brought out. And so there's no shame in learning from your first story and then using what you learned in your next story, which I think that's kind of a good segue because we've really talked a lot about the positive aspects, and not to say that this is necessarily negative, but it would be interesting to hear from each of you. Why did you stop working on your first story?
Yeah, so I'll go first. So I mentioned this earlier. One of the main reasons why I stopped working on Inevitable Destiny was because I started making my art style way too complicated. Like I mentioned, the lighting and shading, I just went like full painter like on, which is not necessary for a comic. I mean, you can do it if you want, but I had myself on like a schedule of uploading every like 2 weeks, and I was really pushing myself, and that kind of caused me to burn out pretty quick. And another main reason was I basically wrote myself into a corner. Um, like I said before, my plot kept changing. I didn't really have a set ending. I didn't really like the ending out of the seven that I chose, and I didn't really know where the story was going. And I wanted to go back and change things, but it was, too late. It was already ingrained in the current plot. Um, so that was another big reason. And then, just life things happened. Like, I got a work injury, and that really kind of made drawing not fun for a while. And that kind of slowed me down, and I kind of got into my head about it. But I put it on hiatus, and then the more I was thinking it over, the more I was like, if I want to continue the story, I'd rather restart it and just rewrite the whole thing instead of continuing with this current storyline, which I do plan on doing in the future, but I needed to give myself a break from the story. I mean, I worked on it for, well, if we're counting writing and stuff, like 4 years. So, and also with the genre, I do love fantasy. I love action and adventure, but like she mentioned, I kind of learned that in this current stage of my life, that's not really the genre that I was more, going towards. Like when I read things like in my free time, I'm I love mysteries. I love Agatha Christie. I love Sherlock Holmes. Things of that nature. Mystery thrillers. And I started Inevitable Destiny because I did really want to write a mystery, but this is gonna sound really sad, but at the time, I didn't think I was smart enough to write a mystery story. I was like, maybe a fantasy story, but I love my main characters from Inevitable Destiny. They just have a special place in my heart. So yeah, and they started me on my comic journey. I met so many amazing creators because I made that story. And like I do plan on returning to it, but it's gonna be a completely different story. Like, of course, the characters will basically remain the same, but I plan on just upheaving the whole plot because it clearly did not work the first time. And actually, I think one of the biggest reasons why I stopped working on Inevitable Destiny is because I wanted to print it, but I only drew it in vertical form. I only drew it in scroll format. I didn't do it from like page format and then convert it to vertical. So I did try I did try a few times to put the panels from the vertical pages onto an actual like comic page format, and it just did not work. I couldn't figure it out. Nothing flowed as well. And I was like, well, dang, I don't think I can print this. So yeah, that was probably one of the bigger reasons, because I'm like, I want to hold my, for me, it's like I want to hold my work in my hand, like, and that's
Yes.
yeah. Moving into this next story, I'm posting it on like 4 platforms when it comes out. So on Webtoon, Canvas, and Inkverse, it's going to be in vertical format. But on Global Comics and Namicom, it's going to be page format. So I'm very excited to do that. But I think I just got really burnt out from my first story, and just kind of, you know, it was time. I think I really didn't want to. I actually cried when I posted that I was, not continuing with the story, because I felt like I was letting all of my readers down. It also didn't help that Webtoon promoted me right before I posted that. So I got like 300 new subs, and then I posted that.
Oh my
Oh,
god.
wow.
Thanks,
That
Webtoon.
hurts.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, and it was like my birthday week as well, so I was like, oh, I don't think I can continue with the story. Wait, why are people tagging me? Oh,
Oh my gosh.
oh, now I have to post this.
Mm.
But, yeah, but, looking back, like, I wouldn't change anything, about it, because of, that was the springboard. That comic, that version of the story. It might come back with a different name, because Inevitable Destiny, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know what that means. I'm gonna say it. I'm exposing myself. I didn't. Well, I was like, well, it kind of makes sense. And then I was talking to my best friend, and she was like, I don't think this makes sense. And I'm like, hey, it's already published.
Oh my
I
god.
can't do anything.
I think it's kind of like they're both saying the same thing.
Yes, that's what
It's like
she said.
Inevitable and Destiny.
No, that's what she said. But like 3 years ago, I was like, but it makes sense. It's like your inevitable destiny. And she's like, that's the same thing. And I was like, I can't just name it Destiny. That doesn't make sense.
Hey.
I wanted.
It makes a little sense if you think about it in terms of like, there's no way to change your destiny. Like, that's the marketing for it. Like,
that was basically what it meant. But I remember I had this discussion with also a few other creators when they asked me what the title meant, and I just said, it means what it says. Don't look too much deeper. but now my new story, The Silent and Deathly, that's a much easier title. And it actually makes sense, because it's about the two main characters. In my new story, the main character, one of them, she is mute, so the silent, and then the other one is a mortician who looks like he hasn't slept in 27 years. So he looks like he's a walking corpse, so that's the Deathly. So I can see, easy to explain, and I don't have to jump around it anymore.
well, we love it.
That's great. I had a kind of I don't know. I had kind of a similar experience. Like when I think back to what the plot of my first webcomic was, I realized it is a bad plot. It's not a good story, and I don't mean that to like just put myself down for the work that I put into it at the time, but just from me spending all this other time like properly planning for my new comic, I realized that there was a lot of plot holes and just like, what's the word I want to use? It just wasn't structured very well. It was structured very poorly. The events in the plot didn't make any sense. The start of the story was okay, but yeah, I like with my first one, I realize now that it's just like I was a writer too. Like, I wrote a lot before. Um, but I mean, I just like I lost the story after a little while, and I think because I didn't even write anything down for the plot. I didn't write out the main story events. I didn't take it in order of like events that make up the plot. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that like I didn't want to make that same mistake. Um, but I was a first time webcomic creator. I was just excited that I was
Mm-hmm.
turning a story I had in my head into something visual. And I think with that experience, like I just learned that I needed, like, if I wanted to be consistent and if I wanted to be a better storyteller, I would actually have to put in more work to do research and take time to map all that stuff out. Um, and I think it's just comes with being a first time webcomic creator or even a first time storyteller. Like, if somebody is an artist but they've never written a story and they want to do a webcomic, it's like it just comes with learning and doing your own research. And I like I if a like in all of our experience, we kind of gave up on a story, but I don't want to say gave up as like a bad thing. I think we all just kind of had that experience of like we learned what not to do and what we could do better, and then we wanted to translate that knowledge into a new project, which I think is just you're growing, right? It's a sign that you're growing, and it's not putting down any of the hard work that any creator puts into their work, but I think like be proud of what you made. Like, be proud that you even started a webcomic in the first place. Like, it is insanely hard to make a webcomic, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. It's like you as a creator, you are the storyteller, you're the scriptwriter, you're the storyboard artist, you are the you're the line art artist. Like, you have all of these roles, and it can get overwhelming too. I don't know if you guys kind of had that experience, but for me back then, it was very overwhelming handling all of those roles at once. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so easy to get discouraged. And like back then, I focused a lot on the numbers too. Like, I was so disappointed. I was like, oh, I only have 200 subscribers after like 5 months or however long it was, and I was just like, it definitely like it's hard not to focus on the numbers too, right? Like, I still struggle with that even now. Like, I don't know what happened, but people just started rate bombing my comic recently, and I have no idea why. And I'm trying not to like let it discourage me from creating, because I know I have a good story, and I know I'm a good artist. So it's like, it's hard to kind of not pay attention and put too much weight into your numbers. And it's hard not to get into the comparison trap as well. But yeah, I mean, I think it's totally okay to maybe like, I don't want to use the word give up. Maybe like break up.
Put it on a pause.
The comic, I think it's fine. I don't think there's any shame in it. I don't think anybody should just be disappointed in themselves, because sometimes it's like, it's sometimes you just learn and you grow, and it's okay to just want to start anew.
I just want to highlight a comment from chat. Leah said it's all useful experiences that help in future endeavors, no wasted experience. And I think that's super relatable. Like, you have to take a second outside of like whatever you might be going through sometimes and really think like, okay, I am growing, I am learning, like I'm so much better than I was yesterday. And it's just like you said, independent creators have so many hats that they're wearing that it is a little overwhelming. And like certain aspects of being an independent creator or releasing anything on the interwebs is it's a little scary, as well as can be a little disappointing when either you're not getting any engagement and you're like, I know it's okay. you know. So I really appreciate you sharing some transparency about that.
But yeah, I wanted to shout out. So Leah, she has a really cool comic called Underneath the Camphor Tree. I recommend go read it. It is excellent, and she's an amazing artist.
Yes.
I wanted to shout her out.
Oh, awesome. Well, remind me, Audrey. I will put a link to her comic in the description. Did everybody go on why they stopped?
I haven't gone yet.
Oh, okay, Shae.
But yeah, so why did you stop working on your first story? Well, a lot of similar things are echoed with Toasty and Claricee, because it was the pandemic time frame, and I was consuming more and more comics, and I think for me, long story short, I just jumped right into it. And I think what ended up happening is that like, so when you're making web comics, depending on how frequently you are producing this, you have kind of an assumed quick turnaround time for the stuff that you're making. So it's kind of like that pressure of like, oh, as soon as I finish one episode, I have to immediately get to working on the other one. So, that's just kind of like the way of it. And I think that because I hadn't prepared myself on the front end with like knowing my character motivations, knowing my plot and stuff, once I was, kind of crunched for time, it was harder and harder to get back on that horse that is the next episode. I put my comic on hiatus twice, and just being able to push myself to make the next thing was just becoming more and more difficult. So I think that's when I started getting the realization that, it's probably time to pack it up, because I just was like writing and making episodes like almost as I was going, which is not sustainable. Like overall, I think that throwing motivation and fun kind of out the window, because it's like, yes, the motivation is you even deciding and making up in your mind that you're gonna make this thing, and then the fun comes from whatever part of making the comic that you really enjoy is. But sometimes when, like, you're working overtime, or health comes into play, or you're just like freaking tired, motivation and fun are not, those things will not motivate you. So when those things don't, aren't, available, then all you really have is discipline. And so I just was not disciplined to continue with making the story. And also, it was not, I guess, as original of an idea, which also was very discouraging, because I want to say, like, I started my story in like 2020, and I think around 2021 another story was like really blowing up, and I think that also kind of discouraged me. And not to say that that should be something, because everybody creates different ideas, and they're all kind of amalgamations of everything that we like. So for me, I'm very upfront about where my inspirations are. But these are stories that are kind of told through the filter of, you and your life experiences. But I think for me, like, yeah, I mean, my story, I felt it wasn't even that original to begin with. So that, coupled with, other comics that were doing much, much better than mine, it just kind of all came to a halt. So I actually am very interested that I decided to even go back to Webtoon, to be quite honest. My comic idea for Space Ultima actually started off as like maybe being a one-off short, like little animated short, and I was like really what motivated me for the story was more of the story itself. I think from there on, I was just trying to figure out in what way I was going to tell the story, and then I was like, you know what? If I really want to make something right now, the based on my time and resources, it was definitely going to be a webtoon, and I'm very glad that I decided to jump back into the webtoon webcomic arena. So yeah.
Oh, thanks so much for sharing. I wasn't going to add necessarily anything, but I feel like because my own personal story reflects a lot of what you guys said. But I guess the only thing I would say for me is like what's held me back a lot with releasing anything in general is like that perfectionism. And part of it comes from
Mm-hmm.
like I can't remember if I've shared this with you guys or not, but I used to be a artist alley artist, like a convention artist, and like I kind of found my niche in that was like doing portraits, like making like the face really pretty and then surrounding it by like pretty aesthetic like flowers or birds or things like that. And so like I did not realize until I had to like draw someone jumping or draw like multiple people in a panel that my skills were so low in those areas that like all of the art just looked terrible to me. And so my point in all of that is like that's kind of what stopped me a lot of times from moving forward was like it like my own art just did not look good to me, and I felt like if my art doesn't look good to me, like how could it look good to anyone else? And I think over time I've kind of just learned to like accept the skill level that I'm at. And like there's so many examples. Well, I shouldn't say there's so many, but there's a number of examples of stories where the art isn't necessarily the best, but it's passable. And with that being said, it's just like kind of inspiring to see like maybe not like one of those amazing mangaka manhwa styles getting recognition just because of the amount of work that the artist and storyteller put into creating the story. And so I think that's been like a balancing act for me in just developing myself as a creator. So I thought like that would be a nice little highlight to add. And I just want to apologize to everybody. I just realized that like our the image card on YouTube says the honest truth on Webtoon platforms. I did not realize I did not change the title. Probably what?
Surprise!
Yep. So we're not talking about Webtoon platforms. So
Is it okay to give up on your comic?
right. So I want to change maybe like give up. I think that's a you mentioned it earlier, like give up isn't necessarily the right word. So I think like saying put it on pause or taking a break from it is a little better. So like from y'all's perspective, is it okay to put the story or idea on pause despite the effort you've put into it? I think we kind of like touched on this, but just to emphasize for the audience, what do you guys think?
I I feel like that is totally okay. Um, to me, it's just a sign of growth. It's a sign that you've kind of learned a lot from your experience, and you kind of want to reapply the knowledge. That's been my experience. Is I learned so many techniques and just learning how to actually tell a story and be better at art. And so I kind of wanted to have a fresh start and have a project that I could apply all of that new knowledge and skill to. And like, I guess it could be harder if you do have like a bigger fan base, like getting featured by Webtoon and then saying, Sorry, guys. I'm actually done with this story.
Yeah.
You know, that could definitely be hard if you do have a larger audience. But I see there's a creator. Her comic is The Jock's Secret Crush on Webtoons. It is excellent. I recommend you all go read it. But she said that she had a comic, and she's a novelist also, like that's what she does full time. But she had a comic that she no longer wanted to keep producing, and so she had like 2,000-ish subs on that comic, and what she did was she basically removed all of the episodes and then she changed it to a completely different comic. She like announced to her readers like, I'm working on this new comic and it will just be in place. So she actually had like those 2,000 subs basically at the start of this first comic, which I thought was really funny. But I think it's fine to want to stop the story. Like it doesn't matter your audience like size. I think, if you're no longer passionate about the story, if you're no longer like wanting to continue with it, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And again, like I will emphasize, if you're don't keep producing something that you're not passionate about, like, and that kind of goes into like create a story that you love, that you're passionate about, because if you're just creating for someone else, if you're just focusing on like, will an audience like this comic, like, then you're not starting in the right place, I'd say. For me, I was just like, I wanted to create a story that I was passionate about and that I loved and that I could fangirl along with my own readers, like I think it's really important to find something you're passionate about, like a story that you're really going for and you love the characters, you love like, I love everything about my comic. I love my characters, so it makes it easier to want to continue with it.
Did you guys have anything to add?
I think I'll just go off what Audrey said. Like, you totally should not feel guilty at all. And I mean, I felt extremely guilty at the time. I felt awful because Webtoon just promoted me, especially. Not great timing on that, but like, because I felt like I had an obligation to my readers that I had to finish the story because I already started it, but I wasn't as passionate about it anymore, and I kept seeing the mistakes, and not that the mistakes were bad, but like, as we've come in saying, like, learn from the mistakes and apply them to our new project. And like, I felt terrible at the time, but looking back, it was the right thing for me personally to do. And it's just kind of, I just think of it as, it was a great start, and I'm moving on to my next project, moving on to new and better and exciting things that I can't wait to share, and just take all that I've learned from my first comic and applying it to my next one.
Yeah, I think that with your ideas, and I kind of grappled with that for a long time, like whether it was a webtoon, a Twitch channel, YouTube, like I think as long as you're communicating with your audience, that really helps to let people know kind of like where you're at versus just kind of like, I guess, ghosting people, I guess is kind of the thing. Because believe me, like, we all have our favorite creators, and when they kind of just like disappear out of nowhere, you have invested so much time in their content and you kind of get like kind of like shell shocked at first. But I think that I understand that, at the end of the day, we're all just people. So people will have to step away for whatever reasons. We can't change that. I mean, even for me, like I use those examples, like my first time using or being on Twitch, it kind of like didn't pan out. But, and then my first time like on YouTube, like it's kind of ironic because like my first time doing all of these things, I gave up on them, but then I came back to them. I like, oh, like I guess I just couldn't stay away. But I think that communication helps, realizing that if you're really, passionate about it, that you can recover followers, you can recover, likes and subscriptions, like, and who knows, like, if you do let go of that idea, then the next idea would probably, flourish 10 times more than the initial thing. So I think that, understanding that, like everybody has kind of said, that time and effort is not for nothing, and it's definitely going to contribute to whatever you do down the line, because you've learned and experienced, the good and bad, and how to kind of optimize it for the future.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where you have to take a lot of things into consideration. And despite, you putting in so much effort, it's sometimes you can almost already see the writing on the wall. So it makes you kind of think like, when should we as creators stop working on a story? Like, how do you know that this is the end?
Oh yeah, so when it's harder to get back to it. Um, that's definitely what it was for me. It wasn't becoming fun anymore. And like I said earlier, fun and motivation, those waver. But when you're just feeling like it's an obligation, really. Like for me, if I have a deadline, like let's say I have this date that I'm like, I need to get out that episode by this date. That's something that is kind of labor intensive, but at the same time, it's like, no, like, I'm working hard. It's not easy, but in like the grander scheme of things, I do enjoy it. I'm gonna get it done, and I'm gonna be excited about it. But I think when you just feel like you're almost dreading it, and whether it's from like
Mhm.
burnout, whether it's from, just feeling like you can't even kind of produce any ideas towards it, that's probably when it's like I should kind of throw in the towel. And I do like hiatuses. They do kind of give, your mind some time to like kind of step away, refresh. It could be a hiatus to decide if you want to return back to this thing, or it could be a hiatus just to kind of, refuel both on yourself and on some ideas. So when I was feeling like the finish line, so for my last comic, when I felt like the finish line was kind of getting further and further away from me, I was just like, okay, this is not like as many breaks as I can take. And also that kind of, it kind of does a justice for your followers in a way, because if you are, I'm being as gentle as I can saying this, if you are consistently being inconsistent with your promises to your audience, sooner or later they will just not tune in, because they just haven't gotten a good reputation with what you're producing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
felt kind of like I was giving empty promises on episodes when they were going to be released. Like, and I'm not talking about like once or twice, I'm talking like a lot.
Yeah.
And so sooner or later, your audience is going to start to thin out, because they're not going to have anything to return to. So going back into like the communication thing, like communication is key, knowing yourself is key, and also knowing that like you really feel connected to that story, that's going to help the longevity of it. But those are all things that I did not have with my last story. And so then I just decided to go ahead and release them.
Yeah, I think there comes a point which I could be completely wrong about this, but I feel like there comes a point when you're working on a project and you just kind of know. Like, I don't know if other people feel that way, but it's one of those things where it's instinctual for me, where I'm like, okay, I don't see myself developing this beyond where it's at, despite what I put into it. And I feel like my brain is picking up on that, like subconsciously. And so I'm formulating ideas for something new, something I want to jump onto next to really like put all of my like time and effort into. And so I think it's a little bit of a balancing act. Like it's really because at the end of the day, for a lot of us, we're probably doing this for fun, or it's still in like a state where we can we're not under contract is what I'm trying to say. So we have the ability to change to do something else. And so I think with that amount of freedom, it is kind of one of those things where it's like, do I want to tie myself to this for the next 10 years, or do I want to make something cute about two characters that are falling in love over playing volleyball together or whatever. So I just feel like there's a lot of like fun elements that really are involved in the creation process. And if you're not enjoying it anymore, I agree with you, Shae. I think that might be a sign. So what about you, Clarice or Toasty? Did y'all have any thoughts?
I think, like, when did I stop mine? I think I stopped my first comic in like August of 2022. I think around that time, I will say I guess I did kind of know that I'm like, I wasn't posting very frequently. I didn't know how I was going to move on to the next episode. I was just feeling really lost with it, and I got to a point where I was like, okay, either I start this over and start anew, or like I just stop it. And I think I just had that feeling of like, I think I could be done with this, just because again, like I learned so much, and I was like, I don't know if I want to start over with this plot or this story again. And I kind of lost a little bit of passion for it too, just because I just didn't do any proper planning for it. And I felt like, I have, how many did I have, like a little over 400 subs or something. I didn't feel too bad. I didn't feel too bad about it. I was like, if people want to stick around and like they want to be here for my next story, then that's great. But I also just kind of knew it was time to kind of take a break from it. And during that break, I was just like, I was doing fan art and just whatever fun illustrations I wanted. And I think taking that time to take a break and just kind of let my mind kind of, I guess, think about things, I was just like, it was fun, but I want to try something else now.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like, there were also other stories that I was thinking of trying to, like, when I was thinking about, okay, what do I want my next comic to be? I was like, okay, well, I have this one story. It's like a vampire romance story. Do I want to try that? Do I want to do, like, my Egyptian fantasy story I had? And I was like, those are all complicated. Like, I know that I would try to equate my art style with the story itself and make it complicated. Like, vampire romance, I think of like dramatic Caravaggio lighting and like really stark colors. And I was like, with the Egyptian like fantasy one, I was like, oh, that's like a ton of special effects. And I was like, oh, it's gonna be too much work for me.
A lot of research too.
Like, lot of research. Like, when I was thinking about doing the Egyptian fantasy one, I was like, okay, maybe I could see what these fantasy manual artists are doing. And then I realized, I was like, that's a whole team doing this manhwa fantasy comic. Like, that's not me. And I was just like, okay, I need to simplify the story so I can simplify my art style. And I think it worked out. I think it worked out. But yeah, I think sometimes you just know that it's time to move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a lot to consider, like, your growth, where you're at, because you could even involve in your storytelling. And so, like, your storytelling doesn't match, like, your premise anymore sometimes, because you can just grow so much. From the time when you start your first story to, even a few episodes to like midway through your first season. And I think, that's one of the cool things that I've learned, I think, from, even just like dipping my toe into comics, is that like the more you work on it, the more skills you gain, like almost instantly. It's so cool to me. And I guess with all of that being said, everybody's kind of more or less, come out and said that we've quit our first stories. Do you have any regrets from working on those stories?
Yes. Okay, I will say I do have regrets, but they're not like bad, and I'll say why. One of them is I regret not properly planning the story. Again, that is one of the things that made me just kind of want to stop with it. I didn't do any proper planning. I didn't write anything down. And, I was like, okay, my next comic, I'm not going to make that same mistake. And another thing I regret was not studying art before I started my comic. I just, like I said before, I just started making it. I just ran with it and just started drawing. But I didn't spend the time to learn anatomy, learn drapery, learn lighting and shadow principles. Like, I think I was just so excited about the idea of doing it. So I would say if someone is considering starting a webcomic, I would recommend, like, if you're kind of new to art, maybe take the time to like study art for a little bit. Study art principles, study anatomy. There are so many great resources on YouTube, tons of videos. Oh, this I did forget to mention. I wanted to mention this earlier, but I regret not studying like storytelling too, as well, and I regret, like, even just formulating a story is very hard, and it takes a lot of time, right? But I wish I had this book. So there's a book. It's called Webtoon School. It's by Hong Nanji. They're they themselves, this guy in Korea, he did a lot of research and talked to a lot of really big webcomic artists in Korea and put this book together. And it basically breaks down like the entirety of storytelling for a webcomic specifically, and then how to like structure a panel to match the action and like the story. Like, you could look it up. It is a really great resource. I highly recommend. It's on Amazon.
I will definitely look it up and link it in the description.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I would highly recommend newbie comic creators, or like if somebody's considering starting a comic, I definitely recommend that to read. It's like it's not very long, but it goes into depth in like how to make a webcomic and like how to create a story, like dives into like plot and your characters and like their motivations and how to create those. Like, it is so helpful. I definitely recommend it.
Oh, awesome.
I regret not doing that as well. It's like researching storytelling, researching studying art, all that stuff.
Yeah, for me, I think like I do have regrets too, but it's in a different sense. Like I think my biggest regret is not releasing the first webtoon I worked on. Like I worked on it, my friend read it, and they were like, "This is terrible." And in hindsight, like
Your friend?
objectively,
Oh.
yeah. They did because they explain though what they found to be bad about it, and like in hindsight looking at it, I'm like, oh yeah, I can see what you're saying. That does seem kind of bad. uh, and so like, but to that version of me in the past, I still wish I would have released it and been like, okay, here it is. And then I feel like it would have either been, people would have been like, yeah, this isn't good, or people would have said like, or not have noticed it, because I do feel like sometimes people don't notice little things like, okay, that arm's a little wonky, or that you forgot to draw a finger here, like. And so it was little things like that that were kind of inconsistent and made like the storytelling flow weird. And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I wish I had released it just because then I feel like I would have gained so much more experience from just doing it. And I feel like part of the process is allowing the readers to like actually get a hold of the series. So I think
Yeah.
that's kind of my only regret ish. So, because like when I released the one episode short that I did, like there was a bunch of flaws in it, but like nobody pointed them out to me, and like nobody actually told me like
Mm-hmm.
anything that was per se wrong with it. So, so I feel like a lot of like what I hype up in my head is not accurate, So,
Yeah. What about you
Hmm.
guys?
I think that my regret would. I wish I just knew how the story was gonna end. I mean, similar to you
Yeah.
guys, it's like, actually taking the time to write up all these things, but I think what happens when you don't really have, I guess, a structure is you start to consume other media, whether it's like movies, anime, TV shows, and I started to notice that these ideas were like creeping into my mind subconsciously, and then they would kind of come out in my writing for like an episode, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, if I had kept going with that story, I probably would have lost the plot somewhere here or there. So
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that was a great thing that I have now. It's like I've got more of a structure, and then if there are some, different inspirations here and there I can take in, then I'll use them. From a storytelling perspective, it is interesting when you do have that first story because you have an abundance of ideas, and it's hard to really kind of like discern and like fine tune these things. Like you'll write a story and then certain things will, you'll want to do this and you have this idea for that scene, when in reality it doesn't fit into that story. But
Mm-hmm.
I kind of
Mm-hmm.
find that whenever I'm in that mode, I'll say, well, maybe if I have like this type of story in the future, like maybe if I only strictly work on a romance, then maybe I will include that idea. So yeah, I think that the structure element would have really helped me um, in some of those like earlier writings. Other than that, I I do think that I didn't really advertise it as well, but I guess in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't because it didn't, end up being a thing. But
Mm-hmm.
I did find it's ironic because I'm trying to get my subscriber count up on the comic, but before I did inevitably remove my last story from Webtoon, I saw I had like a pretty substantial amount of followers, so I was like, man, dang, if only there was a way to transfer them over.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, other than the regrets. Oh, and then of course another regret that I will always make sure to let people know. I wish that I wasn't so hard on myself.
mm,
I think that's the
Yeah.
part that
Yeah.
comes. from, like we said, the perfectionism, and just knowing that, like I said before, the thing that you end up not panning out, it might come to, come to be a reality in one way or another in the future. So it's like never say never, but yeah, I think that now I'm like much kinder to myself if something doesn't work out how I expected it to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say much of what both of you said is kind of the same for me. Like planning, giving myself time to plan the story. Like Audrey, I was just so excited to just like I'm working on a webcomic. I want to post it as soon as possible. So I was just so excited. I didn't give myself that time in the beginning to like decide what art style do I want for this story, or I did do character sheets. They're buried in my computer, but I basically stuck with those character designs, but I did like switch one character up like completely, and I didn't make a new character sheet for her. So like all that initial planning stuff, I wish I did because I didn't. But I'm doing all of it for my new story right now, and it's it just makes things so much easier for me, at least. Like, this is the character design, this is what they look like from this view and this view, and it just makes it so much easier, and I just didn't have that with my first story. And like the perfectionism, I was definitely really hard on myself with my first story, like especially with like deadlines. And well, I said I was going to post this episode this day at this time, but I'm running really behind. Like, I'm shading, lighting, and doing the lettering on the same day I'm supposed to release it. But I didn't think I could give myself like an extra like few days or a week even. So I think after that, it was just kind of like I wish I was easier on myself as well, because looking back, I was really hard on myself. It was like wanting the story to be the best it could be, but in return, I was being really hard on myself, and that's not good, especially for the creative process. Um, you you have to give yourself some grace, like Shae said. And with working on my new project, I'm definitely doing that, and it's making the creative process so much easier, and it's so much less stressful working on my new project, than it was like at the very end of Inevitable Destiny, like the start of season 2. Like, every time like I sat down to work on it, I was like, oh, I have to work on it. You know, like I have to work on the next episode, but I don't know where it's going. I was like, there were some pretty cool scenes in season 2 that I had planned, but those were like way far in the future. So like the current, like where we currently were in the plot at that time, I was just like, can we finish this up as quickly as possible, because this arc is taking 10 episodes again. I can't do it. But I think we've already kind of said everything that we all kind of regret. But I'll say again, I wouldn't wish I didn't do it. Like, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I'm still really proud of myself that I did it. And for the people who read my story and the amazing artists and friends and readers that I've met through it, like that is probably the best takeaway I've had from Inevitable Destiny. Not just learning like how to be, developing my art style and getting better at storytelling. It's really like the comic community, which I was really scared to get into, but everyone is just so nice, and and everyone is so supportive, and I was really scared when I put my comic, on forever hiatus, I call it. Inevitable hiatus. Yeah. I was really scared that, like, people were gonna be mad at me, because a lot, like, people were invested in the story, but everyone was like, no, we totally understand, like, you need to take care of yourself, and, if you make a new story, we'll be there. So, it's that, and that, has really, let me be easier on myself, and, yeah, I was not as easy on myself working on my first story.
I had kind of an opposite experience in that, where I was so happy with everything I was doing. Like, I did not compare myself to other people. I was just like, I was proud of every drawing I made, like, and then now I'm a lot more hard on myself than I was back then. I think it's kind of because I have like a community now. I'm getting a lot more subs than I did in my last one, and so now it's like I have a bigger audience, and I feel like more pressure to put out a really good episode and like really great art. And I think I've started to like really get into the comparison trap more. Like I look at creators that have been doing this for like 10 years. Like my favorite webcomic artist, Instant Miso, her comics Iron's Lament, Where Tangents Meet, Eternal Nocturnal, what she's doing now. Like I aspire to be as good as her. And I started to get into this like, oh, my art isn't as good as hers. Like, oh, why can't I just be as good as her? It's hard not to do that. And I don't like, I try not to, but it's weird that back then I was not putting pressure on myself. I was just enjoying the process, and now I feel pressure, and I get this perfectionism way more than I did before. And it's hard not to do that. I think, the community I found like so supportive, so positive. Like I went to I have like a webcomic creator group I'm in. I went to them today because my comic has been getting low rates for some reason, and I was freaking out about it. I'm like, oh no, but like if it gets below a 9, people won't want to read it. And they all were like, Audrey, you have a great story, like your art is amazing, like who cares about the numbers? And I was like, but you don't understand. I was like, I was getting really anxious about it, and I was like, you know what, like I love my story. I'm proud of what I'm doing. I'm proud of what I've been putting out, and like all my comments are positive. People are enjoying the story. I really shouldn't focus on the rating, like it's just, I know it's not reflective of my story, and I think, it can happen. Like creators that get featured can get rate bombed. Like I know one creator who had that experience where her comic got featured in recommended series, and then people like rate bombed it. Even so one of my other favorite creators, her comic Secret Lies Next Door on Canvas, it's amazing. She's like an art god, I swear. She's incredible. She posted on Reddit about her just posting about her comic, and people went and bomb rated it for no reason, just because she posted on Reddit. So yeah, it's like it's not reflective of the story and the art. I think people just are dumb. I will say people can be mean, and they can, for no reason, but yeah, I mean, like if like some of my favorite creators have comics that are rated like in Webtoon terms low. They're like we're in the 8s, but I love their comics. I'm like, I don't understand why people aren't liking this, So all that to say, like I totally get the comparison and like the perfectionism, and it's hard not to do that, but I think it's just like a matter of focusing on the positive, like comments and like people that are saying nice things, and don't let it get to your head if some random person is like, this comic sucks, So, yeah. It's hard, though.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to to take in and consider. You made so many good points, which now makes me want to know, for either your current project or your upcoming project, how do you feel about it? Like what are your thoughts? And maybe you can explain why you feel the way you do.
Well, if you can't tell, I'm very excited for my upcoming projects.
As you should be.
Yeah, I have to, like, I just want to spill the beans on, like, the entire plot, but I can't.
I mean, you
I know, it's like,
can.
oh, I mean, but it's a mystery. I really can't say anything related to, like, the main plot, actually. But I'm just really excited. Like I said, I'm really taking my time with the plot and preparation, and, I don't really feel pressured as much, like, to make it. I'm making it because I want to make it, and, like, there's an ending. I can confirm there's
Ending
a
confirmed.
settled ending. Ending confirmed, guys. But I just think, like, we've been saying this whole time, just taking everything that I learned from my first comic and applying it to this one. Like, the characters in this comic, I love my characters in Inevitable Destiny, but as I was writing, I realized they kind of lacked a certain depth. Like, they only went so far, and, like, some characters were easier to write, like, kind of realistically than others. Like, I had 4 main characters in my previous comic. There's 2 main characters in my new comic, which makes it much easier to write. But, like, the main character of Inevitable Destiny, her name is Eddie. Like, I love her character, but looking back, like, writing wise, I wish I gave her, like, more character depth. Like, there's this one episode that I wish I could totally rewrite because it just doesn't make sense with her character. So I'm really taking my time developing these new characters and their storylines, especially within the historical setting my new story is in, which is the 1890s. And boy, was it crazy back then. But I just these characters. I feel just writing wise, they just have more depth, and I'm just really really excited to share their stories. All of them, all of the characters in this story. A lot more gray characters in this story for sure. I'll say that. We love gray characters. Middle of the ground characters. Are they good? Are they evil? Or are they just there? There's a lot of those characters. But again, like, the genre, like, I was really, like, I thought, like, 3 years ago that I wasn't smart enough to write a mystery, but, which is really sad for me to think about, like, that I thought that about myself. But now it's like, no, I want to write a mystery thriller. So I'm writing a mystery murder thriller because I love those genres, and I feel like after Inevitable Destiny, I'm ready to do that. And just the vibe of the story is so much more set, because I feel like Inevitable Destiny was kind of all over the place, which again goes into the planning. But I wish I could, again, release this comic right now, but it's not ready. The plot, I will say the plot is basically done. I'm working on the subplots right now, which are also almost done. And I have most character designs done, and I think soon I'm going to start actually working on some comic layouts and some actual comic pages, and it will be published. And I cannot wait. I'm so excited.
I'm super pumped for your comic too. Oh my gosh. I just want to read it right now.
I know.
Yes, I want all
So
the
hype.
details.
Oh hi, yes.
Can't say anything. I just will say it was difficult going from a fantasy story to a historical story, because there's details that I didn't think of in the fantasy story, like um, like, was this invented in the 1890s? Does this thing exist yet? And like things like that. Where in a fantasy story, it's like, you know, there's certain like fantasy tropes and, you know, like and worlds and stuff, which I also didn't have settled at the beginning of writing Inevitable Destiny, because there's like holograms in the first 2 episodes and then they never show up again. So it's kind of nice to, with world building, I have like an actual like reference, because it is kind of based in the real world, just a fictional like city. So, but yeah, my characters Loretta, Elijah. I cannot wait to for everyone to follow their story, because there's some twists and turns, a little bit of romance. Yes. And they're arranged to be married, so they're engaged. So
Oh.
I will say that, yeah. So, but I'm just very, I can't say I'm very excited like too much, can I? Because I'm very excited.
You can, yes,
Yeah.
you can. Well, we're excited too.
Very much
you gotta
so.
post it. Like,
Yeah.
We need
I'm
more
just
behind the
messaging you and you
scenes.
post it. I'd be like, yeah.
All right, what about you guys? Your series.
Yeah. So I because I spent time trying to create a story that I was really passionate about, I get so excited to keep working on it and like get into like the drama and shenanigans that are coming, and like I think I just I'm so happy when I work on it. Like if I'm in a bad mood, I could draw my comic and I'm happy again. It's like sometimes it can feel like a lot of work, just because like this next part of this episode is more work because I have some more panels and I'm trying to like figure out how to structure it so it's less panels. But um, honestly, like it makes me really happy to be able to work on this project. And it also makes me happy that it's helped me connect with a lot of people. Like just like I kind of laugh because like just because I like drawing, like I've met so many cool people and I've made so many awesome connections. Like, it's opened me up to a whole new community, and I've just found people that I also equally love supporting as well. And I've been introduced to a lot of really amazing people, and it's nice to have a community that has similar interests and like similar hobbies, or just all of us being webcomic creators or just artists in general. Like I don't I have a I have a big collab coming up in October. I won't say any more than that, but I'm like so excited for it, and I can't wait to like put it out. And I know people are gonna be like, what? Anyway, I'll post about it on Instagram. It's a Webtoon collab, but yeah, I mean, I love the community it's given me, and I love connecting with others, and I'm always looking for other people to support, because I know how hard creating a webcomic is, and I know how much work goes into it. And so I'm always wanting to, reach out to people, leave a good positive message or a comment. Like I had this experience a while ago where I go on Canvas and I look for new things to read. So I found this comic and it looked really cool. It's like really positive and like wholesome. And I was like, oh my gosh, this looks really good. I left a comment and I was like, I'm loving where the story's going. Keep it up. And then the artist was like, oh my gosh, Toast Bun, you're here. Hi. I didn't think you knew I existed. And I was like, what? And so then she messaged me on Instagram and was like, hey, I'm a silent supporter of your comic. It really surprised me that you commented on mine. I was like, are you kidding me? Your art is amazing. I love your story. Like, so it's just I love meeting new people in the space, and it helps me as well. Like I learned so much from so many people, um, and I really appreciate the community I have, and it makes me even more excited to share my webtoon because I know people are going to enjoy it with me.
Oh, that's awesome. What about you, Shae?
When you're mutual fans, mutual fans of each other, that's always a plus. Um, yeah, so the project that I'm working on currently, Space Ultima, oh my gosh, it's just been such an enjoyable experience. Really night and day. I think that when I took the time to develop the characters and even pour some of myself into the characters, it allowed me to really get just like so supportive of the characters themselves and just be very excited about where they go. Like, I think that a lot of the sentiment is echoed where it's like, these are my babies. Like,
Yeah.
these are
Mm-hmm.
my
Yes.
babies. I want to see them thrive. I want to see them go in the direction that, I take them. And also be really excited when other people are so enthusiastic about it. Like,
Yeah.
reading the comments and seeing how people are reacting. That's been my most satisfying experience. Was a one reader who they commented. I guess they like maybe I had 5 episodes out, and they literally put like a paragraph long comment on each episode, doing
Whoa.
basically it was like a live react.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing.
That's so cool.
I love it.
Yeah, and I was just like in awe because you always write these stories and you hope that people understand what it is that you're trying to say, whether it's with the plot
Mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm.
something deeper. And just to see that people are resonating with the story being told is very,
Yeah.
very satisfying.
Absolutely.
So that's why I think that right now, I'm doing things in a way that I wish I have done before, and I'm really holding on to the steering wheel and just like taking as far as I can go. And then even learning as I'm going along. So especially in like the area of social media, I've been trying to like kind of amp that up more and more. Um, and it's a constant evolution. It really is. Even now that I feel more confident in my skills, I am still learning something new. Apollo, when you were doing your live reading of my episodes the other week,
Mm-hmm.
and I was looking and being like, "Oh my god, I've really like come so far." Like those
Mm-hmm.
episodes don't
Yes.
feel that
Yes.
long ago,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm looking at these being like, oh dang, like I'm better at my line work. I'm optimizing.
Yeah.
I've become more detailed, and so yeah, it's just kind of like that great satisfaction to see things how far they've come. I would say, and then how far they're
Yeah.
gonna be out in the future. So I'm very optimistic.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. That
Really, really
I
excited.
will say I was so devastated though when spoiler, that slime did not make it further than episode 3. That hurt my heart.
Oh.
I know. I was like, oh my gosh, he's becoming a fave too quickly, and he's gonna get snatched away from everybody.
Oh my god.
So, yeah, and that's the amazing thing I think about like comics per se is like you sometimes you can really see the growth from that first episode to the last episode or the current episode, and I feel like that's really encouraging for like any artist. Like I have so I used to be fully traditional. Like I did not get into digital art until recently, but I have this like binder that I put all of my illustrations in, and it's like broken up by year. And I love to flip through it to be like, "Oh, this is what I was drawing like in 2017." And so I think that's so cool because like with the webcomic thing, you have like kind of a way to look back and be like, "Man, I'm really progressing in my art." So, I think that's awesome. I will say for my secret project that I will it will remain unnamed until it's closer to its debut. I'm so excited for it. And like hearing you guys talk about how excited you are for your current projects just makes me want to be like, I'm releasing mine tomorrow. So I really just want to say I appreciate all of you coming onto the stream, sharing your experiences, sharing your wealth of knowledge and wisdom. It has been so amazing. And so just thank you so much for being on stream.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Apollo.
Yes, yes, yes. And so just maybe if you guys could stick around for maybe like 10 minutes, this is where we'll did you guys have any concluding comments, or did you want to shout yourself out before we wrap up?
I will just say, like, if you're a new creator, just trust the process and don't like beat yourself up if you're not perfect or if you're not getting like a crap ton of subs off the bat. Just try to have like the attitude of, you know, create for yourself, you know. I feel like it's really easy to get in the comparison trap, and it's really easy, like, you know, I've again, like, I'm sure all of you feel this way at some point, you know, just try to create for yourself and create a story that you'll want to continue creating, even if like not that many people will read it. And who knows, maybe you'll get like more support than you think you will.
Yeah, I would definitely say that done is better than perfect.
Yes.
It is something that you will find your people, those people who enjoy whatever you have to put out there, will find your webcomic. And yeah, just like Toasty said, it's going to be something that you want to be your number one fan. You want to make that content for you who opens the Webtoon app or whatever platform it is and tunes in for that episode upon its upload.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think that once you kind of like, feel that, that's when you enjoy the creation of what you're making more. But yeah, just to shout out Space Ultima, Artsume Shae on Webtoon, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitch. And yeah, I've been kind of on a just kind of trying to divvy out my energy. So I've got a lot of YouTube videos up, but hopefully in the next few weeks I'll be able to make some new videos. But yep.
Yay. Cool.
And Clarice?
Well, I'd say to new creators out there, take all the time that you need to create your first story. Don't rush yourself. Even if you're super excited to post it, take the time that you need before. Don't rush yourself. And you can find me at Claricee Draws on basically every platform. Keep an eye on my YouTube because I might be posting there soon. Start posting there again, so keep an eye out there. If you guys want some exclusive content, behind the scenes stuff that I'm not releasing on socials just yet for The Silent and Deathly, give my Patreon a little check. And read The Silent and Deathly whenever it comes out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on stream with me. I really appreciate all of you. It was an amazing stream. I learned a lot, and I'm sure chat learned a lot too. Quick thing as we wrap up, I just want to say all of the links for everything will be in the description down below. I will make sure to update them with anything that we referenced. And so if you're wondering about something and you happen to notice that it's not there, just send me a quick message and I'll make sure to update the description. So our question to the community is, tell us about your first story and how it's going. We definitely want to know. Comment down below. And with that, we're going to end the video. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, please like, and I will catch you in the next video and or roundtable. All right, bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks.